I went under the third time and did not come up. There is a moment in black water when the cold stops arguing with you. It had been arguing all night in my hands, in my jaw, in the place under the ribs where a man keeps his courage. And then it simply stopped, and the water above me went the soft gray of a shuttered window, and I thought, with a clarity I have never had on dry land, so this is how the Caldenmere loses a king. Not in the sunken ring, not with a challenger's hands on me and 1,000 of my people watching. In a flooded reed bed off Sallow 8, with a drowned dog somewhere near me in the dark and nobody within a mile who knew my name. I want to say I fought it. I did not. I remember opening my hands. I remember the reeds going by my face like fingers. And then something took hold of my collar and hauled, and whatever it was had no more strength than I did, and hauled anyway. I will tell you the rest of it properly, because she will not, and because there are men still living who have told it wrong on purpose. The challenge came at low sun, on the last dry day of the turning. I was on the long causeway with Aldous Pry, my second, counting barge hulls for the winter grain, when the horns went off behind us, 3 flat notes, the old challenge call, a sound the Caldenmere had not heard in my lifetime. Aldous stopped walking so suddenly that a boy behind him ran into his back. "That's the reckoning," Aldous said. "I know what it is. Nobody's called the reckoning since your grandfathers." "Aldous, I know what it is." Corvin Straith came up the causeway with the sun behind him, which was a piece of theatre, and 30 of the bittern reach at his shoulder, which was not. He was a big man, broader than me through the chest, gray coming in at the temples and no softness anywhere in the face. He had held the reach for 11 years and held it well. His people did not starve. That is worth saying, because it is the reason so many stood behind him later. He stopped 6 paces off and put his fist to his heart, which the right requires, and did it slowly, which the right does not. "Torrin Hale, Alpha King of the Caldenmere," his voice carried. He had arranged that too. "I call the reckoning on you at the turning." Behind me, I heard my own men go still. "On what ground?" "On the ground that you are a caretaker and not a king." He said it without heat, which was worse than shouting. "You've dredged channels and mended roofs and fed the low islands for 6 winters, and you've built nothing, taken nothing, and made this mere a place other packs walk through without asking. I'd have it otherwise." "That's not a ground, that's an opinion." "The right doesn't ask for a ground, Hale. It asks for a stake." And there it was. The reckoning is old and it is short, and my grandfather liked to say that everything in it exists to stop men calling it. The two who fight it name a stake, and the stake must be the whole of something, and the whole of something cannot be given back. In the days it was used most, the stake was usually a life. Straith had come with a better one. "The loser," he said, "leaves the water, not exile in name, the whole of it. He goes over the eastern reed line at the next dawn and never leads pack nor hold nor household again, and his name is struck off the roll at Marrowgate as if he'd never been born on it." The causeway had gone so quiet I could hear the barge ropes creaking. "Say it back," Straith said, "or refuse it and be the king who refused." I looked at him a while. He wanted me to be angry, and I was, and I did not give it to him. There is a thing my mother taught me, which is that the man who has planned the conversation is depending on you to say your line. "I say it back," I said. "The loser goes over the reed line at dawn and never leads again, and his name comes off the roll. Tomorrow in the sunken ring, at the fall of the light." "Tomorrow," Straith agreed. He turned to go and then turned back, and this is the part I have thought about most in the years since. He did not smile. He looked almost sorry. "You'll want to keep your vigil properly," he said. "It's the only thing the right still cares about. The vigil is the one piece of the reckoning that has never been argued over. From the setting of the sun before the fight until the horns at dusk the next day, the one who is challenged sits in the sunken ring alone. No food, no fire, no counsel, no leaving. It is not a test of strength. It is older than that. The idea, as Mother Ivet Sorrel explained it to me when I was a boy with my chin on the stone lip of the ring, is that a man who is about to stake the whole of himself should have to sit for a night with the whole of himself, and see whether he can stand the company. Break the vigil and you forfeit, not you may be judged to have forfeited. You forfeit. The crown goes across the water to the challenger without a hand being raised. It has never been softened, because no king has ever needed it softened. The sunken ring sits a half-mile out from Marrowgate on a shoal, and it is the strangest thing in the Caldenmere. A stone amphitheater that some older, better-organized people built when the water was lower, so that now the tiers rise dry out of the mere, and the floor of it stands knee-deep in black water all year round. You go down the steps, and the cold comes up your shins, and you stand in the middle, and the whole bowl of it throws your breathing back at you. I went down at sundown with my cloak on and my boots off, because you keep the vigil in the water, and Mother Ivet struck the stone at the rim 3 times and left me. The lanterns of Marrowgate were out across the water. Frost was already coming down on the tiers. I would like to tell you I sat there and thought about my kingship, or about my grandfather, or about the 60-odd men and women whose lives ran through decisions I made at a table. I did not. I thought about how cold my feet were. Then I thought about Straith saying you'll want to keep your vigil properly, and I turned that sentence over for 2 hours the way you turn a stone with a shape you don't like, and I could not make it come out as a courtesy. At something past the middle of the night I heard oars. Not one boat. Several badly rowed, coming fast and crooked, and someone shouting my name across the water in a voice that had already gone hoarse. My king! Aldous Pry came over the rim of the ring and down 2 tiers on his backside, and stood up in the water with his hands out as if he could push the words at me faster. Aldous, you cannot be here. Cutter's neck is cut. The cold that had been arguing with me all night suddenly stopped bothering. Cutter's neck is a withy dam, wicker and stone, and 106 years of patching, and it does not look like anything at all. It is a low, ugly wall about as high as a man's chest, and it stands across a gap between 2 spits of land on the eastern side of the mere, and the only thing it does is hold back the high autumn water so it goes out slow through the eastern channels instead of coming down all at once on the western shallows. The western shallows are the low islands. Nettled, Sallow 8, the Reeks, a dozen no-name reed bars with houses on stilts. Something under 100 people live out there, and the reason they live out there is that nowhere else will have them. Old people, sick people, women with no pack behind them, a handful of men who came off other holds badly and were let stay on the understanding they'd be quiet about it. They are the poorest people in the Caldenmere, and they are on my roll, and I fed them through 2 bad winters, and Straith had used it against me on the causeway that very afternoon. Cut where? I said. The middle of it, cut not broken. Merrick's man went along it with a lantern. The withies are sawn. Aldous swallowed. It's going. It's got maybe an hour of standing left in it, and then the whole eastern head comes over the shallows. Get boats out to the low islands. I've sent everything I've got, and everything I've got is 9 hulls and a dozen men who have never pulled a channel in their lives. My king, the water's already over the bars, you can't see the channels, there's no light, and the reeds are down flat. He stopped. He looked at me standing in the middle of the vigil ring. His face changed. I have thought about this for a long time, and I want to be exact, because men have since credited me with a nobility I did not have. I did not weigh it. There was nothing to weigh. If I had sat down in that water and kept my vigil, I would have been king of the Caldenmere at dusk the next day, and at least some of the people out on the reeks would have been dead by dawn, and I would have known which ones because I know their names. That is not a decision. That is just a description of a man I was not willing to be. But I want to be honest about the other half of it too, because it matters later. I also thought Straith planned this. I thought it while I was climbing the tiers. He had not called the reckoning to fight me. He had called it to put me in a stone bowl in the middle of the mere and then hand me a choice with no good side to it, and either way he took the Caldenmere, and either way he could say afterwards truthfully that I had chosen. He had judged me correctly. I have never quite forgiven him for that, and I have never been able to call it a lie. Aldous, I said, strike the stone, say the words, say them loud enough that Ivet hears them from the shore. My king. Strike it. If I'm going to break the vigil, I'm not going to sneak out of it. He struck the stone at the rim 3 times, and his voice cracked on the second word, and he said it anyway, the old formula. The one who was set here has risen and gone, and the sound went out over the black water toward the lanterns, and that was the crown gone. Simple as that. 2 minutes, a wet stone, a horseman. I went over the rim and into the boat. We rowed for Cutter's Neck first, because I'm a fool who likes to fix things with his hands. It was still standing when we came up on it, and standing is a generous word. The withies had been sawn through in a stretch about the length of 2 men, and the black water was pushing a bulge through it like a tongue, and the whole wall breathed in and out as we watched. Can we shore it? Aldous said. I got out of the boat into the water on the high side, and the cold hit me in the chest like a horse. It came to my waist. Under my hands the dam was moving, not shaking, moving, the slow, patient way a thing moves just before it stops being a thing. With what? There's nothing here. There's the boat. The boat's a bucket. It'll go through the gap and take the rest with it. I put my shoulder into the bulge and it gave against me an inch, and I felt something under my boots roll away downstream, and I got out of the water fast because there is a moment when a man stops being help and starts being one more thing to be pulled out. It's going. Get to the islands. And then, because I have never in my life been able to leave a thing alone, I looked one more time and I saw, on the low side of the dam, standing in the water on the wrong side of it, up to her hips, with her back to the wall and both arms out along it as if she were holding it up, one person. I had a lantern in the boat and I put it up. She was a woman of about 30, in oilskin and a wool cap, and she was not holding the dam up, because nobody can hold a dam up. She was feeling it. Both hands flat, head turned, reading the tremble of it the way you'd read a horse's flank. Get out of there, I shouted. She looked up at the light without hurry, then she looked back at the wall. It's got about a half hour, she said, not shouting, just pitching it to Carrie. Not an hour. Whoever told you an hour was guessing off the top of it. It's the bottom courses that have gone. Woman, if that comes down while you're on that side of it. Then I'd have been standing in the wrong place, she agreed, and waded out, unhurried up onto the spit, and I saw she had a boat there, a long flat-bottomed reed punt with a pole in it, and I saw that the punt was already loaded to the gunnels with rope and empty water casks and a coil of old net, which meant she had come here with a plan, which meant she had understood the situation before Aldous had. You're a pilot, I said. I'm a pilot. Whose? Nobody's. She stowed the pole. I take fish to Marrowgate in the morning and old women to the physician on a 3-day, and I get paid mostly. She looked at me then properly, taking in the boat, the men, the cloak, and I watched her arrive at who I was, and I watched it not change anything at all about how she was standing. You're the king. I am. Then get off this spit, because it's going to be underwater directly, and your men row like they're beating a carpet. Aldous made a noise. I have never in my life been happier to hear a stranger insult my household. What's your name? Murren Dunnock. She was already pushing the punt off. Sir, Nettleb's got the deepest sit. It'll go first and it's got the most old people. Send your hulls there. Don't send them to the Reeks. Why not the Reeks? Because they'll not get there. She said it without any drama, the way you'd say a door was locked. There's one deep channel into the Reeks and it runs crooked and it's got a bar across the mouth of it that you have to come at from the north. And in the dark with the reeds down and the water up, your men will go onto that bar and sit on it till morning, and then there'll be 9 of them out there needing pulling off as well. Then who goes to the Reeks? She had the pole in the water by then. She looked at me across the black. I do, she said. I'm the only one left who knows it. I have been told since, many times, by people who were not there and mean well, that I ordered her out. That the Alpha King commanded a boat, and she answered. I did not order her anything. I did not have anything to order her with. She was not of my pack, she owed me no service, and I had that night nothing to give her. No coin on me, no dry ground to promise, not even a crown, since I had thrown that away in a stone ring 40 minutes earlier and did not yet know how completely. She went because she had a punt and a pole and a memory of a crooked channel, and because 60-odd people she mostly did not know were about to be in the water in the dark. That is all. There was no more to it than that, and I have stopped letting people improve it. I'm coming with you, I said. You'll be a passenger. I'll be a passenger with 2 arms. She considered that for about as long as it takes to blink. Get in the middle and sit down and don't stand up, whatever happens. If you stand up in a punt in a channel, you'll put us both in. I got in the middle and sat down. Aldous said something that I could not hear over the water, and I have always assumed was a prayer or a complaint. We were about 100 lengths off when the withy dam at Cutter's Neck let go. It did not crash. That is the thing nobody believes. It made a low sound like a hall full of people all deciding to leave at once, and then the surface of the whole mere behind us tipped, and I felt the punt lift under me and start to travel sideways without anybody doing anything to it. And Murren Dunnock said, quite calmly, "Right," and leaned on the pole, and we went into the dark with the flood behind us. Nettled, we reached ahead of the water by about the length of a hymn. There were houses on stilts, 11 of them, and a plank walk between them, and every window was lit because they had heard the horns and did not know what the horns meant. Murren put the punt against the walk without slowing and shouted one sentence. Cutter's Neck is gone. Everybody in a boat now. No bundles, nothing you can't carry in one hand. There is a kind of authority that has nothing to do with rank. Doors opened. People came out. And here is where I began to understand what I had got into, because a woman came out with a lamp and said, "Murren." And then a man on the far end shouted, "It's Dunnock, she's got a punt." And along the whole plank walk in the dark with the flood coming, people started doing what she said because it was her. Aldous' hulls came in behind us, 2 of them, and we filled them. It was not orderly. It was old men being handed down like furniture, and a woman refusing to leave a goat and being told, by Murren in 5 words, that the goat could swim and she could not. Somebody's chest of linens went into the water, and somebody wailed about it, and got into the boat anyway. I did what I could, which was lift. I am a large man, and that night that was the entire sum of my usefulness, and I have never been so aware of how small a thing it is. Twice people looked at me in the lamplight, and I saw them not recognize me, because a soaked man with his sleeves shoved up is a soaked man. Once an old fellow said, "You're a strong lad, get my wife," and I got his wife. We had nettled clear 22 off it. I counted them into the hulls myself when the flood came over the bar. It came as a shove, not a wave. The plank walk simply was not there anymore. One of the stilt houses leaned and kept leaning. "Sallow 8, Murren said, poling off. "Then the reeks." "How many on Sallow?" 19, and they'll all be on the roofs already, they're not fools. She was breathing hard now, which she had not been before. The reeks is the one. 14 there, and half of them can't walk, and there's 1 channel in. Then we go to the reeks first. "No," she said it flat. "Sallow's on the way, and Sallow's got a bar under it that'll be gone in the hour, and if we pass them tonight and come back at dawn, we'll be lifting them out of the reeds instead of off the roofs. We go in order. Sit down." I sat down. It has occurred to me since that I had been Alpha King for 6 years, and no one in that time had told me to sit down twice in one night, and that this was probably the beginning of everything. Sallow 8 took us until the small hours, and cost her the first thing. They were on the roofs, as she'd said, all 19, and the hulls could not come in because the water over the bar was already running too fast across the gap, and the men could not hold a hull steady against it. Murren put the punt broadside on and jammed her pole down into the bar and held us there with her whole body, while people came down off the thatch and stepped across into the boat, one at a time, in the dark, onto a plank the width of a hand. It took a long time. The pole was reed-ash, thick as my wrist, and after the 11th person I heard it start to talk. "That's going," I said. "I know what it's doing." Her voice was thin with the effort. "6 more. Give it to me. You don't know the angle." "Murren." "6 more," she said, and I understood that I could take the pole from her by simply being stronger than she was, and that it would put 20 people in the water. And I have never in my life felt as useless as I did sitting in the middle of that punt with my hands open on my knees. The pole broke on the 17th. It went with a crack like a shot, and she went down onto one knee in the bottom of the boat, and the punt swung. And the last two, a boy of about 10 and his grandmother, jumped for us and made it. And the punt went off down the running water sideways with 21 people in it and no pole at all. She was up before I was. "Paddle," she said to everyone, to nobody. "Hands both sides. Not fast together. Boy, count for them, count out loud." The boy, whose name was Pell and who was 10 years old and had just jumped a fathom of black water in the dark, counted for 11 minutes while 20 pairs of hands paddled a loaded punt out of a running channel. And I have heard court musicians in 3 kingdoms, and I have never heard anything like that child's voice going 1, 2, 1, 2 over the water. We put them onto the causeway stones at the eastern end, and Aldous' men took them, and Murren stood in the empty punt with her hands hanging and her breath going like a bellows, and I saw for the first time by lantern light what her palms looked like. "Get another pole," I said. "There must be. There's a spare under the boards." She was already dragging it out. It was shorter and thinner and had been a spare for a reason. "It'll do for one more run." "Murren, look at me." She did, and I want to say I saw something in her face and knew, and I did not. I saw a tired woman. "There are 14 people on the reeks and there is 1 channel in, and you have been in this water since before midnight. Tell me the truth. Can you do it?" She thought about it. That is what I remember. She actually stood and thought about it, and then she said, "I can get in. I don't know about out." And she got in the boat. The run to the reeks took the rest of the dark, and for most of it I could not see the boat I was sitting in. There was no moon worth the name, and the lantern was worse than useless. She made me shudder it after the first bend, because the light bounced off the water and blinded her and told her nothing. So she pulled us through a mile of drowned reed country by sound. I want to put that down plainly, because it is the single most extraordinary thing I have watched a person do, and it looked like nothing at all. Every 3rd or 4th push, she would let the pole drag a moment before she lifted it. "What are you doing?" "Feeling the stubble." She did not stop while she answered. "Reeds get cut different depths. The channel's cut deep and the bars are cut shallow, and last summer's stubble's still standing under there. Pole goes through soft, we're in the channel. Pole knocks, we're over a bar. You can feel that. I've been feeling it since I was 6. A push, a drag, a push. Left a bit now, don't lean." Twice she stopped us dead and held the punt against the current, listening, with her head turned like a woman trying to hear her name in a crowded hall. The second time I heard it too, a low seam of noise off to the right, a sort of hurrying. "What is that?" "That's the water going somewhere it shouldn't." She sounded, for the first time that night, unhappy. "That's between the bars on the reek's east side. That's not a channel. That was solid reed bar this morning." "Meaning what?" "Meaning the flood's cutting itself a new door out of the reek's basin." She put the pole down and shoved us on. "And if it gets that door open properly, it'll drain the basin through in about the time it takes to boil a kettle, and everything standing in the basin goes with it. Sit forward. We're going faster." The reeks was 13 houses, and a drying stack on a spine of mud that the mere had been arguing about for a century. There were 14 people on it, and 6 of them could not walk, which she had told me, and which I had heard, and which I had not understood until I saw it. 2 old women in one bed who had not been out of that house in 3 years, a man with a leg that ended above the knee, a woman so far gone with child that she could not get herself over the sill, and a pair of ancients, brother and sister, Tolly and Mab Ashcott, 91 and 88, who had to be carried like sacks of meal, and who both apologized the entire time. The water was at the floorboards. In the time it took us to tie up it came over them. "Where are your hulls?" Murren said. "Coming. Coming isn't a place, sir. They'll come from the north over the bar, the way you told me. I sent Aldous the whole of it, the crooked run, the north approach, the bar at the mouth. He'll have it word for word. He's tedious that way. I got the first of the Ashcotts up onto my shoulder, but it'll be one trip and it'll be soon or it won't be. Then we get everyone up on the drying stack, and we hold this basin together until they're here," she said, "or we lose the lot in one go." The drying stack was the only thing on the reeks built by someone with sense, a platform of old sleepers on posts, twice a man's height, where they hung eels. It would take 14 people if nobody moved much. Getting them up there took us the better part of an hour. A ladder, a rope under the arms, me lifting and her placing because I could lift anyone and she was the only one of us who knew where a body could and could not be taken hold of. She talked the whole time. Not comfort, instructions, names, small ordinary things. "Mab, put your arm round my neck. You're not heavy, you're just awkward. Ferris, sit on the north side, you're the one who can see. Pell, come away from the edge." The boy Pell had come back with us. He had refused, loudly, to be left on the causeway with his grandmother, on the grounds that he could count and everyone had heard him do it, and Murren had looked at him for a moment and then said, "Get in," which was, I think, the only mistake I ever saw her make, and she would not agree with me about it to the end of her days. We got the last of them up. 5 more came out of the reeds while we did it, a family off one of the no-name bars, waist-deep, holding a door between them as a raft, the father calling out to know if this was the reeks and whether there was anywhere left to stand. There was not really. We made room. 19 on a drying stack meant for eels, and under us the sound of the water going somewhere it shouldn't had stopped being a seam and become a voice. Murren climbed to the top of a post and looked east, and even in that dark I saw her shoulders change. "It's opening," she said. I have thought since that if she had simply said it's over, nobody on that stack would have argued with her. She had earned the right to say it. She had been in the water since before midnight, her hands were ruined, she had lost her pole and half her boat's worth of rope, and she owed not one of us a thing. What she said instead was, "Sir, how strong are you honestly?" "Honestly, not enough for whatever you're about to say." "Good, honest is better." She came down off the post. "The breach is about the width of this stack and it's cutting down. Once it's deep it's finished, the basin empties, this mud spine goes and the posts under us come out like teeth. Before it's deep it can be plugged. Not stopped. Plugged, slowed, made to argue with itself for an hour." "Plugged with what? There's nothing here." She did not answer me. She looked at the punt, tied at the post below us, riding low and black. I understood, and I did not like it, and I said the stupidest thing I have ever said. "No, we may need the boat." "For what? 19 people." She was already going down the ladder. "It carries 8, and it's a mile of open water to the causeway, and the basin will be gone before I've made the first crossing. The boat is worth nothing to us floating. In the gap it's worth an hour. Murren, that's your living." She stopped on the ladder and looked up at me, and I will remember the look until they put me in the ground. It was not noble. It was not brave. It was impatient. "Yes," she said, "are you coming?" We took the punt into the breach. It was the worst quarter hour of my life, and it lasted. By the count Pell kept from the stack because we asked him to, 22 minutes. The new gap was a raw slot in the reed bar about 8 paces across, and the whole eastern head of the Caldenmere was going through it in a smooth black hump with no white on it at all, which I have since learned is the sort of water that kills people. We came at it from the side, in the slack behind the bar, and she showed me what to do with about 6 words, because there was not time for more. Casks in first, they're stoppered, they'll float and jam, then the net over them, then the boat sideways, and we sink her on top. How do we sink her? We stand on her and let go of everything else. The casks went in and were gone in a blink, and I thought the whole thing was a farce. And then they came up against something under the surface, the shoulder of the cut, and stuck, and the water piled on them and held them there. The net went over. Then we brought the punt round broadside, and she put the short pole down through the boards on the upstream side to pin it, and we went over the gunwale together into water that took my legs out from under me, and would have had me if I had not got both arms through the net. I have been in fights. I have been under a horse. Nothing I had done before had prepared me for the feeling of a river deciding to fold a boat with me standing on it. The punt bent. I heard it go, a long splintering complaint down the length of her, and then she sat down into the slot and stuck, half crushed, and the water came up over the top of her and slowed, and the sound of the breach dropped by half. Murren was hanging off the net beside me with her cap gone and her hair flat to her skull, and she was laughing. Not much, 2 breaths of it. What I said is funny. Nothing, she hauled herself up the net. Nothing at all. I've wanted to be rid of that boat for 6 years. That was a lie, and we both knew it, and it was the kindest lie anybody has ever told me. Aldous came over the north bar at the gray end of the night with 3 hulls and 11 men, exactly the way she had described it, and I have never been so glad of a tedious man. Getting 19 people down off a drying stack into boats in a rising basin is not a story with drama in it. It is an hour of lifting and passing, and one old woman's dropped shoe, and a great deal of shouting about weight distribution. The 2 Ashcotts went first and apologized. The woman with the child went second and did not. The man with one leg would not go until the others were down, and Murren argued with him about it for a full minute and lost, which was the second time that night I saw her lose an argument and the first time I saw her enjoy it. The plug held. It groaned and shifted twice, and it held. We were down to the last hull and the last 3, Murren, myself, and old Ferris Lyle, who had sat on the north side all night because he was the one who could see, and who was 76 years old and would not be helped down the ladder. He got to the 3rd rung from the bottom, and the post shifted, and he went in. I do not remember going after him. I remember the water, which by then was moving in the basin in a great slow wheel toward the plug, and I remember getting a fist in the back of his coat and finding him already turned the wrong way up. I got him to the hull. I got both his arms over the gunwale, and 2 of Aldis's men had him under the shoulders, and I felt the weight go off my hands. And then the wheel took me. There is no fight in it. That is the part I could never make anyone believe afterward. It was not a wave, and it did not throw me. It simply put its hand flat on my chest and took me away sideways from the light, in under the reed stubble, and the sound of 19 people shouting my name went off like a snuffed candle. I came up once and got a breath and saw the plug, and knew that was where the water was going and therefore where I was going. I came up a second time somewhere in the flattened reeds, and got nothing but reeds. The 3rd time I did not come up. And I have already told you what that was like, and I told it as well as I know how. The cold stopping its argument, the gray shuttered window overhead, the reeds going by my face like fingers. What I did not tell you, because I was saving it, is the last thing I thought. I thought Aldous struck the stone. It's done. Somebody should tell the low islands it wasn't for nothing. Then a hand came down through the water and took hold of my collar and hauled, and had no strength in it, and hauled anyway. She had gone in off the hull with a coil of net round her forearm and the other end round the post, which is the only reason either of us is alive, and which was, she informed me later, not brave, just the one thing left to do that was quicker than thinking of something better. She got me onto a mud bank at the north end of the spine, the last 2 feet of the reek still above water, and she had nothing left. She told me long afterward, when I finally got it out of her, that she could not stand up by then and did the last of it on her knees. I was not there for any of that. I was somewhere with no light in it at all. What I have is the coming back, and the coming back was this. Mud under my shoulder blade, a weight on my chest twice hard enough to hurt. And then air pushed into me, warm from somewhere, into a body that had given up the whole idea of it, and my throat opened, and the black water came up out of me, and I turned my head and was sick into the mud and breathed and breathed and breathed. And with the first of that borrowed air, everything in me came level. I do not know how else to say it. All my life I had been full of a kind of small chop, the way the mirror is on an ordinary day, never still, always working at itself. It stopped. It went level, the way water does when the wind drops off it, all at once and all the way to the edges, and in the middle of that flat silence there was one thing, and the one thing was her, and it was not a discovery. It was a correction. As though I had been carrying a name spelled wrong my whole life, and someone had quietly fixed it. I got my eyes open. She was on her knees over me with her hair and her face and mud to the elbows and her mouth still open from giving me the last of her own breath, and she had gone absolutely white, not from the cold. She had one hand up at the base of her own throat. "What?" she said. I put my hand to my throat, because mine had begun to burn. In the hollow at the base of my neck, where a man's collar sits, a line had come up under the skin, dark as wet slate, about the width of a finger, curved like the lip of a wave. It was warm under my hand. It was warm the way a stone is warm hours after the sun has gone off it. She had the same one. I could see it from where I lay, coming up out of her skin in the gray light like something surfacing. And out over the water, at exactly that moment, the horns went at Marrowgate, 3 flat notes across the whole mere, the call that meant the challenged man's night was over and the day of the reckoning had begun. Murren Dunnock looked down at me lying in the mud with her mark on my throat and mine on hers, and said the only thing that could reasonably be said. "Sir, what have you done?" She got up off her knees before I did and went straight back to work, which is the truest sentence I can write about Murren Dunnock. "Can you stand?" "Give me a moment." "You haven't got one." "The bank's going." She had one hand still at her throat, and she took it away as if the mark had been a bit of grit, and she dealt with it. "Sir, up." Aldous found us at first light, poling the last hull along the drowned spine with 2 men, and a lantern he had not thought to shutter, calling my name in a voice that had gone past hoarse into something ruined. When the light came round onto us, he made a sound I had never heard a grown man make, and put the hull into the mud so hard that one of his own men went over backwards into the bilge. "They said you went into the wheel." "I did." "Then how?" "She came in after me." Aldous looked at her. She was sitting on the gunwale wringing the water out of her sleeve, mud to the shoulders, hands wrapped in a strip of her own oilskin, because she had cut them open on the net and had bound them herself while I was still coughing up the mere. "Madam," he said, "who are you?" "Nobody in particular," said Murren. "Have you got water that isn't this water?" He's had about a gallon of it. We came into Marrowgate with the sun coming up behind the causeway and the whole waterfront out to meet us. They had been out all night. The stone landing was covered in people, and in things people had thought to bring: blankets, bread, a stack of somebody's chairs, a great copper of soup that a woman named Hessie Marrable had been boiling since the middle of the night on the theory that whatever happened, someone would be cold. The rescued were in among them being fed and wept over. Old Tolly Ashcott was asleep sitting up against a bollard with a stranger's coat over him, and his sister was scolding somebody about it. Aldous had the count. He had made it 3 times because he is that sort of man. 22 off Nettled, 19 off the roofs of Sallow 8, 19 off the drying stack on the Reeks, the 14 who lived there, and the 5 who had come out of the reeds holding a door. 60. Not one of them lost. Not the 2 old women who had not left their bed in 3 years, not the man with 1 leg, not the woman heavy with child, not the ancients who apologized the whole way, not the boy Pell, who had counted a punt out of a running channel and was at that moment being carried about the landing on his grandmother's hip, entirely too old for it, and asleep. 60. I have signed my name to a great many documents in my life, and I have never been as proud of anything as I am of a number I had almost nothing to do with. They saw me and started toward me, and I got out of the way of it, because the horns had gone at dawn, and there was a thing that had to be done before anybody thanked anybody. Mother Ivet Sorrow was standing at the top of the landing steps in her gray with her hands folded, and she had been standing there, I later learned, since Aldous struck the stone. "Mother, my king." She looked me over, the mud, the shaking, the reed cuts, the borrowed coat. Her eyes stopped at my throat where the collar sat open, and stayed there for a moment longer than politeness allows, and then moved on without a word, and I have never in 30 years been able to decide how much she understood in that half-second. The stone was struck at 4 hours past sundown. Price said the words correctly. I heard them from the shore. "Then say the rest of it." "You know the rest of it. Say it in front of these people so nobody has to guess." She raised her voice. She was 70 years old and had a voice like a bell in a fog. "The vigil was broken. The reckoning stands forfeit. At the fall of the light in the sunken ring, the crown of the Caldenmere passes to Corvin Straith of the Bittern Reach without a hand raised, and Torin Hale goes over the eastern reed line at tomorrow's dawn and leads nothing again, and his name comes off the roll at Marrowgate." The landing went absolutely silent. 60 wet people and 400 dry ones, and a copper of soup steaming into the cold, and nobody said anything at all. Then a man's voice from somewhere back in the crowd said, "Then the roll's wrong," and somebody else said, "Aye." And it started to come up out of them the way water comes up through a floor, and I put my hand up and it stopped, because that at least still worked. "It isn't wrong," I said. "It's the right. I've known it since I was a boy with my chin on that stone. I broke it with my eyes open and knowing exactly what it cost, and I'd break it again in the same hour for the same reason, and neither of those 2 facts cancels the other one out. Go and get warm. I'll see you at the ring." I got about 4 steps. "That's all very fine," said Murrendonnock behind me, "but you're going to fall over in a minute, and I've been up to my chest in that water since before midnight to keep you out of it, so if it's all the same to you, I'd rather you did it sitting down." Aldous spent the morning trying to find me a door. He is the best man I have ever employed, and that is the only time I have ever been genuinely angry with him. He came at it 4 separate ways. That the breaking of a vigil under a general summons of the Mere had precedent from the drowning year and might be argued. That a challenger who arranged the emergency had corrupted the right and forfeited it himself. That Mother Ivet could be asked, he said, delicately, the way a man handles a hot dish, to find that the words had been struck by a second and not the principal. I let him finish because he had rode all night too. "Aldous, look at me. My king. If I take that crown back on a technicality, then for the rest of my life every man in this Mere who wants to get out of something looks at me and knows it can be done. And the first time I hold one of them to a promise, he'll think of me standing in the ring with a clever answer in my mouth." I put my hand on his shoulder. "I broke it. I'll say so. That's the whole of my defense, and it isn't a defense." He was quiet a while. "It was a cut dam," he said. "Somebody cut it." "I know. That's not nothing." "No," I said. That's not nothing. But that's a crime, and this is a right, and they're going to have to be dealt with in that order, and I'm not going to be king when the second one gets dealt with. He went out and I heard him swear once in the passage, which in 11 years I had never heard him do. I slept 2 hours. When I came out into the yard she was still there, which surprised me, sitting on an upturned barrow with her hands rebound properly by the physician and a bowl of Hesse marbles soup going cold beside her, watching the water. "You didn't go home." "Home's under 6 feet of the mere." She said it without any weight at all. "And I'm not walking into that hall to be looked at, so I'm sitting out here." I sat down on the barrow next to her, which took some doing as it was a small barrow. "Show me," I said. She hesitated, then she pulled her collar down. The mark had settled overnight. It was not glowing, and it did not sing, and it did nothing dramatic whatsoever. It was simply there in the hollow of her throat, a curved line the color of wet slate, the width of a finger, like the lip of a wave a moment before it turns. Mine was the same. Since the mud bank, whenever she was within about 30 paces of me, the inside of me went level, that flat quiet, all the way to the edges. And when she went further off than that, the ordinary chop came back, and I had spent the morning discovering that I could tell exactly where in the building she was without looking, which is a thing I had heard old men describe and had privately thought was sentiment. "Do you know what it is?" I said. "I've a fair idea. I'm not a fool, and I've heard the stories the same as everyone." Her jaw was tight. "I'd like to say something, and I'd like you to not be a king about it for 1 minute." "Say it." "I don't want it." "All right. I've had one thing my whole life, and it's that nobody ever needed anything off me that I hadn't agreed to give." Her voice did not rise. That was somehow worse. "Not a pack, not a hold, not a husband, not a name on a roll. I go where I like and I poll for who I like, and if I don't like the look of a job, I don't take it. And now there's this on my neck, and everyone's going to say a thing came and decided for me. And they'll say it kindly, which is worse. Then it decided nothing." She turned and looked at me. "You've a mark on you, and I've a mark on me, and neither of them is a rope," I said. "I'll tell you plainly what I feel once, and then I'll let it alone. Since you breathed into me on that bank, I have been quieter inside than I have been in my whole life. That's the truth, and it's mine to carry. It doesn't put one thing on you. If you get in a boat tomorrow and pole east and I never see you again, then I'll be a man with a mark on his throat and a long memory, and that will be the end of it, and nobody in this mere will ever hear a word from me about you that you haven't approved." "You mean that?" "I've 8 hours left of being able to promise anybody anything," I said. "I'd rather not spend them lying." She looked back at the water for a long moment. "You're a strange sort of king," she said. "I'm about to stop being one, so it hardly matters." She picked up the cold soup and drank some of it and made a face. "About that." They came at the fall of the light. The sunken ring holds perhaps 2,000 on its tiers, and there were more than that. They were on the tiers and standing in the shallows around the shoal and sitting in boats moored gunwale to gunwale in a ring 3 deep, so that the whole thing looked like one enormous raft with a stone bowl in the middle of it. The bittern reach had come across in force, 60 hulls, and they had a right to. A reckoning is a public thing. Half the packs of the mere had come. There were wolves on the upper tiers among the people, gray and black, and the pale sandy sort you get out of the eastern holds, sitting or lying with their forepaws over the stone lip, watching the way wolves do, which is to say without any expression at all and missing nothing. The floor of the ring, which stands knee-deep in an ordinary year, was up past mid-thigh after the flood, cold enough to make the tiers seem like a good idea. I came down the steps with my boots off and my shirt off and the mark plain on my throat, and if anybody had a thought about that, they kept it, because Corvin Straith came down the opposite steps at the same moment, and the whole ring stopped breathing. He looked exactly as he had on the causeway, except rested. Mother Ivet struck the stone 3 times. The reckoning was called at the turning by Corvin Straith of the Bittern Reach upon Torin Hale, Alpha King of the Caldenmere, she said. The stake was said and said back and cannot be altered. The loser goes over the eastern reed line at the next dawn, leads nothing again, and his name comes off the roll. She let that sit. The vigil was broken at 4 hours past sundown before witnesses, and the words were struck. By the right, there is nothing to fight. Corvin Straith, come forward and be given what you have won. I want to record what happened then exactly, because there are 3 versions of it in circulation, and only one of them is true. Straith did not come forward. He stood in the water on his side of the ring with his hands at his sides and said, loudly enough to reach the top tier, "Hale, did you break it?" "I did." "Say why, say it properly. There's people here been told 6 different things since dawn." "The withy dam at Cutter's Neck was cut through with a saw," I said. "Word came to me in the vigil that the low islands were going under. I broke the vigil and went out. I knew what it cost when I stood up, and I did not stop to think about it. And I want that on the record too, because I'd not have anybody believe I agonized. There was nothing to agonize about." "And you say I cut it." "I said this morning that you'd planned it." My voice carried well enough. "I said it to my own second in my own hall, and it'll have traveled, so I'll say the rest here where you can answer it. I thought you'd called this reckoning to put me in a stone bowl and then hand me a choice with no good side to it. That's what I thought at the time. I'd like to hear you say whether I was right." "You were wrong," said Corvin Straith. "Then say the whole of that too." And he did, and it broke him, and I did not enjoy it as much as I had expected to. "A man of mine cut it," he said. "Hesk Marrow, my own bannerman, 16 years in my house. He went out at dusk with a saw and 2 boys, and he did it, and he came back and told me at first light, standing in my hall, pleased." Straith's voice did not shake. It went flat, which in a big man is worse. "He thought he'd handed me the mere. He thought I'd thank him." 2,000 people did not make a sound. "So I'm not going to be given anything today," Straith said. "I'll not hold this water on a sawn dam and 60 souls that were nearly the price of it. If I take the crown off a forfeit that my own man arranged, then it's Hesk Marrow that made me king, and I'd sooner drown." He put his fist to his heart, slowly again, but it was a different slowness this time. "Mother, set the right aside and let me have it honestly. The stake stands as said. I'll fight him for it." Mother Ivet Sorrel looked at him for a long time. "The right cannot be set aside," she said, "but it can be answered. If the man who has won a forfeit refuses it in front of the mere and asks for the fight is the older thing and it stands." She struck the stone. "Does the king agree?" "He does," I said. "Then it is a reckoning again, and the stake is unaltered, and God help the pair of you. I should tell you what I had, going in, because it was not much. I had been in the water since the middle of the night before. I had been drowned, properly drowned, emptied and brought back some 10 hours earlier. My hands were cut. My ribs were wrong on the left side where the plug had folded the punt against me, and I had eaten 1 bowl of soup in 2 days. I am a big man, and I have never in my life relied on being clever. Straith had slept, eaten, and warmed himself, and he was broader than me through the chest, and had beaten every man in the Bittern Reach for 11 years running. There are no blades in a reckoning, and there is no shifting, either. The old right is men's hands and nothing else, which is a thing my grandfather also said existed to stop men calling it. The wolves on the tiers watch. They do not come down. That is the whole of their part, and they know it better than we do. He came at me across the water and put me down in about 9 seconds. I got up. He put me down again, and this time he held me under, which he was entitled to do, and let me up when I stopped being any use to him, which he was also entitled to do. And I came up with the black water going down my throat for the 2nd time in a day, and heard, in a great blurred wash, 2,000 people making a noise. I could not get to him. That was the thing. He was fresh and I was not, and every time I closed, the water dragged at my legs and took the speed off me, and it did not take the speed off him at all, because he was pushing off a floor with a whole night's rest under him, and I was pushing off a floor with nothing under me whatsoever. The fourth time I went down, I did not think about the crown or the mirror or my grandfather. I thought the cold stopped arguing again. And from the north rim of the ring, in the middle of all that noise, in a voice with no carry in it at all, a voice that should not have reached me and did, somebody said one word. Together. I came up out of the water and found her. She was standing on the lowest tier with her hands still bound, and the mud not entirely off her, and she was not shouting encouragement, and she was not weeping, and she was not praying. She had the flat, impatient look of a woman watching somebody handle a boat wrong. And I understood what she had told me at 3 in the morning, in a running channel, with 21 people in a punt, and no pole. Not fast, together. I stopped trying to be quick. I have thought about it since, and I do not believe I decided anything. I simply stopped, the way you stop pushing a door that opens the other way. The water in that ring was not still. It had a slow wheel in it, coming in off the shoal at the eastern gap and going round the bowl and out, the same wheel that had taken me off the reeks, and I had spent one entire night with a woman who read water by the feel of the stubble under a pole, and something of it had got into me. I let the wheel have me. I went where it went. I timed my feet to it. Pell, I heard her say without turning her head. And a 10-year-old boy on the lowest tier of the sunken ring, in front of 2,000 people, began to count out loud. 1, 2, 1, 2. By the 8th count the tier above him had it. By the 20th, the low islands had it, the 60, who had come out to the ring in Aldous' hulls and stood together on the north side, 22 off Nettled and 19 off Sallow, 8 and 19 off the drying stack, old Tolly Ashcott hammering the stone with the flat of his hand, and his sister keeping better time than he did. By the 40th, the north half of the ring was counting, and by the 50th the Bittern Reach had picked it up too, because you cannot help it, and because there is nothing on this earth as contagious as a rhythm. I moved on the count. I stopped meeting him and started letting him arrive, and each time he arrived the wheel had moved him half a pace further than he meant to go, and I was already where that put him. He was a better fighter than me. He is a better fighter than me now. But he was fighting a man, and I had stopped fighting a man and started poling a channel. I got him on the 9th count of the 7th set, with the wheel behind him and his back foot skidding on the shoal stone, and I put him into the water and went down after him with my forearm across his chest and my other hand flat on the floor of the ring, holding him under exactly as long as he had held me, and not one heartbeat longer. I brought him up. He got one arm free, and I let him have it, and he did not use it. He put his open hand on my shoulder instead, which is the yield, and the ring came apart at the seams. We sat down in the water where we were, both of us, because neither of us could stand. That's a filthy way to fight, Straith said, when he had the wind for it. That's the water fighting. I only got out of its road. Where in God's name did you learn that? Last night, I said, off a reed pilot with a broken pole. He laughed. It hurt him and he did it anyway, and the two of us sat in the flooded ring like a pair of drunks in a ditch, while 2,000 people made a noise you could have heard at Cutter's Neck. Then he stopped laughing and said, Hale, what are you going to do about Hesk? What would you do? Hanged him. Then it's as well you lost, I said. I got up. It took 2 attempts. Mother Ivat struck the stone and it went quiet, more or less, and I stood in the middle of the sunken ring with my ribs grinding, and said the only piece of proper kingship I managed that whole week. Hesk Marrow comes off the roll at Marrowgate and out of the Caldenmere at dawn, and his name goes on the stone at Cutter's Neck, so that everyone who mends that dam for the next 100 years knows who cut it. He'll not hang. I'll not have this mere start hanging people over water, because once you begin that you never find the end of it. I turned to Straith, still sitting. Corvin, you said this morning you'd sooner drown than hold the mirror on a sawn dam. I believe you. But it was your house, and your hall and 16 years of your table that made a man who thought he'd be thanked for it, and you know that better than I could tell you. I do, he said. Then mend it. The bittern reach rebuilds cutter's neck. Stone, not withy, the whole 106 yards of it, and the reach pays for it, and you stand in the water while it's done. I looked round the tiers, and when it's finished the reach keeps it, every year, forever. If it ever goes again, the mere knows exactly whose name is on it. Straith got up out of the water then, slowly, and put his fist to his heart, and this time he did it fast, a soldier's snap, the way you do it to somebody you have decided about. Done, he said. He was 3 years building it. He was 58 when he started, and he stood in the water for most of it, and I have seen the stone. It is the best-made thing in the Caldenmere, and it will outlast every one of us. He never called another reckoning. He and I quarreled at council for 11 more years, bitterly and often, and I trusted him with things I would not have trusted to my own family, and when he died I carried the front left corner of him. You will want to know about her, and I have been putting it off, because it is the part I did worst. I did not make Murren Dunnock my Luna that night. I did not put my cloak round her in front of the ring, or take her hand on the steps, or say anything at all in public, and it took me the better part of a week to understand that this was the single thing she would have counted as a betrayal. What I did instead was ask, and go on asking badly for the best part of a year. She would not come into the hall. She took a room over at Chandler's on the Marrowgate waterfront and went back to piloting inside a month. The Mere lent her a punt. 4 different men lent her a punt, actually, and there was an unseemly amount of competition about it. And she took fish to market in the morning and old women to the physician on a 3-day, and got paid mostly. And when people tried to pay her extra, she charged them the ordinary rate and looked at them until they took the change. The Mere would not leave it alone. That was the trouble. By midwinter they had a name for her out on the islands, the Ferryman, which she loathed, and worse ones in the ballads, of which there were 4 by spring and all of them wrong. In one of them I ordered her out into the flood. In another she poled a boat single-handed to the sunken ring, and stopped the fight with a word, which is nearly true and therefore the most annoying of the lot. She heard that one sung in a tavern on the waterfront and left before the second verse, and the man singing it never knew who had walked out. "They've made you a story," I said. "They've made me a saint," she said with real disgust. "I did what was in front of me with a boat I already owned. Do you know how many people were out on that water that night? Prize men. Hesse Marable boiling soup since 2 in the morning. That great fool of a boy counting. There were 40 of us and they want 1. Then let me say so, publicly, in the hall at the turning with the roll open. I'll say every name." She thought about that for a long moment. "All right," she said, "that one you can do." So that is what I did with my first turning after the flood. No coronation of anybody, no cloak, no ceremony at all. I stood up in the hall at Marrowgate and read out 41 names off a list Aldous had made and checked 3 times, and beside each one what they had done, and Hesse Marable's soup got the same weight as anything else because it deserved it. It took 40 minutes. It is the longest anyone has ever seen me speak, and the only speech of mine that people still quote. Her name I read out in its place, alphabetically, between Aldous Prize and Ferris Lyles, with no more said about it than any of the others. She told me afterwards that was when she stopped being frightened of me. The rest came slowly and mostly in boats, which was the only place she was ever entirely herself. I learned to poll badly and then adequately, and then she would want me to be accurate, never well. She learned that a king's day is 9/10 listening to people be wrong at length, and formed opinions about several of them, and was right about all but one. I asked her 4 times in that year, and she said no 3 times, and the 4th time she said, "On conditions." "Name them." The low islands get the channels dredged proper, and not as a kindness, on the roll in the accounts, every year the same as the causeway. The pilots get a roll of their own, so a woman poling a punt isn't nobody in particular when she goes to a physician. And Cutter's neck gets checked twice a year by somebody who isn't a strafe. Those are policies, I said. You're negotiating a treaty. I'm negotiating a marriage. If I'm going to be looked at for the rest of my life, I'd like it to buy something. Then she looked at the water for a bit and said, in a completely different voice, and the fourth one's just for me. Say it. Don't ever thank me for that night. Not on an anniversary, not at a feast, not when we're old. I'll not have it hanging in the room. I have kept 3 of those 4 faithfully. The one I broke once, 31 years later, and she forgave me, and told me it did hang in the room and that she had been right all along. We were married in the spring at the water's edge with about 90 people there, which is the smallest royal wedding in the history of the Caldenmere, and was entirely her doing. She wore gray. Mother Ivet, who was by then well past 70 and had opinions, tied our hands with a length of net cord, which is not traditional and which she did without asking anybody. And old Tolly Ashcott, 92 by then and still going, apologized throughout. I will tell you one thing from that evening and then I will stop, because the rest of it is ours. Late on, when the hall had got loud, we went out and sat on the landing steps with our feet over the water like a pair of children, and she took my hand and turned it over and looked at the scars the net had left across the palm, and put her thumb along one of them, and did not say anything at all for a long time. That is the whole of it. That is what I have instead of a jewel or a vow. A woman with rope scars on her hands holding mine at the top of a flight of wet stone steps, with the noise of a wedding coming out of the doors behind us, and the mark at both our throats going quietly cold in the night air. We had 4 children. 2 of them turned out to be pilots, which infuriated her, because she had wanted better for them and delighted her, which she never once admitted. I am 68 years old, and I am writing this because Pell Wickery, Councillor Wickery now, 40 years old, the best man in my hall and still the fastest counter in the mere, told me that if I did not, the ballads would win. So here is the end of it, and it is not a coronation and it is not a vow. 2 nights ago the wind got up and dropped again, and the mere went flat, the way it does before the turning, and my wife came and stood in the door of the council room where I was reading a report about grain barges and said, "Come on." We took a punt out from the Marrowgate landing about an hour after dark. She let me pole, which she does now, out of what I can only describe as charity. There was no moon. The lanterns of the town went small behind us, and the water made that hollow knocking sound under the boards that it makes nowhere else in the world. And off to the east, black against a slightly less black sky, we could see the long, low line of Straith stonework holding the whole eastern head of the Caldenmere exactly where it was supposed to be. I put us into the channel off Nettled and felt for the stubble the way she taught me, and got it wrong, and put us up onto the bar with a soft, grinding shudder that I felt through my boots. My wife, Luna of the Caldenmere, 61 years old, who has been pulled out of that water and gone back into it more times than any person living, sighed the way she has sighed at me for 34 years. "You're leaning," she said. "You always lean. 34 years and you still think it's your arms." "It is my arms." "It's your feet. It has always been your feet." She held out her hands for the pole, and I gave it to her, and she stood up in the dark and put it down and had us off the bar in one push, the way she has always been able to. Then she stayed standing and poled us on up the channel, and I sat down in the middle of the boat where she had put me the first night I ever met her, and did not stand up, whatever happened.